Wild Bunch 3, coming to a stadium near you.
You are Locked On Trojans, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Fight on, everyone. I'm your host, Mark Holkin, and thank you for making Locked On USC part of the Locked On Network, your first listen every day. Whether you're watching this show on YouTube, wherever you want to download your podcast, this show is always free, and this show always appreciates your support. Game off. We got to talk more about Monopoly Go. This fast-paced game lets you team up with friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. So download Monopoly Go, now free on the Google Play or App Store. Game on. If the defensive line that USC is recruiting for 2025 comes to fruition, you got the class. So far, you have a class of Justice Terry, who is a verbal commit, 5-star. Isaiah Gibson, high 4-star commit, both guys from Georgia. Gus Cordova, 4-star out of the state of Texas. If those three hold together, and then they add just a couple more guys like Justin Hill and Elijah Griffin, if USC gets both of those guys to commit with the previous three, even just one of those two guys, watch out. I think USC might start, they might have to start taking bids for, statue sculptures. New Wild Bunch 3. Yeah. We've had a couple of them. We're talking about the defensive line, why it's so important, and why this 2025 recruiting class is so important. Let's talk about the Wild Bunch. One of USC's greatest defensive lines in her. USC's got a really long history of playing football. Really good defensive players. One of their groupings was called the Wild Bunch back in 1969. Came after a movie. Well, in 1969, the Wild Bunch featured a stellar defensive line unit. It was coached up by their D-line coach at the time was Marv Goo. The D-line had Jimmy Gunn and Charles Weaver as your defensive ends, and you had your tackles, inside guys, Al Cowlings and Toady Smith. Now, just to kind of give you an idea, Coach Marv Goo was not a big guy, very, very small in stature compared to defensive linemen. Small, but he wasn't someone you wanted to mess around with, get in a fight with, because he just didn't understand the word "stay down, you're beat." He just, that concept didn't ring true in his head. So yeah, it was. They were nicknamed the Wild Bunch after the movie, but it was actually O.J. Simpson's Ford Bronco buddy, Al Cowlings, who played on the defensive line, who actually gave them the name, the Wild Bunch. And it was because of the way they played the games, just so hard-nosed. Reckless abandon, I believe, is how it was described. That season, USC finished the year 10-0-1. And they also finished it off with a Rose Bowl win over Michigan. Just to kind of emphasize and put into context how dominant that defensive line was. Against their crosstown rivals, UCLA, they sacked the Bruins quarterback 10 times in that game. In that one game. And look, back in that day, in that era, it was all about powerful running games. Well, let me add to the legend of the Wild Bunch. Did you know that they allowed just 2.3 yards per carry throughout the season? Yeah, pretty impressive. And just an FYI, I think everyone will agree that today's college game has probably become a little bit more pass-oriented. Nevertheless, the Big Ten Conference is still kind of holding on to that former era back in the day more than anyone else. They'll throw the ball around, but they love to run the ball in the Big Ten Conference. And you know what? That's where USC is going to be spending the majority of their time when they're not playing the out-of-conference game. So, Wild Bunch 2, they came around roughly 30-something years later. And Wild Bunch 2 consisted of, you had defensive ends, you had Omar Nazel, you had Kenichi Udeze, BKU. Inside tackles, you had Mike Patterson, and Sean Cody. Those guys played with that same reckless abandon, fierce determination as the Wild Bunch. That's why they were named Wild Bunch 2. Their D-line coach was Coach Orgeron. Back then, that was the Pac-10. They led the Pac-10 in total defense, rushing defense, scoring defense. They finished the year 11-2 in 2002. Fourth in the nation. You might remember the bowl game. They destroyed Iowa. Yeah. Anyways, that season, 2002, that defense, the Trojans faced 9 1,000-yard rushers. Okay. Not a single one of those guys reached 100 yards when they played against USC. In fact, USC as a team held teams to just 83 yards rushing per game. The best part of the Wild Bunch, too, oh man, 3 of those guys, they were just sophomores in 2002. That means all of them returned in 2003. You might remember in 2003, USC opened the season inside Jordan-Hare Stadium on the Plains against Auburn. When that day was over, Auburn, War Eagle, they watched USC leave that stadium with a 23-0 victory. Yeah. No, Mr. Crittenden. If you know, you know. Let me put it this way. By the time 2004 rolled around, USC split the national championship in 2003 with LSU. And then that 2004 season ended undefeated. And they walloped Oklahoma, Boomer Sooner, 55-19. So how important is a dominant defensive line? Well, Coach McKay, who coached Wild Bunch 2, he said this: I was never worried before a game because I knew that they would at least keep the game close and we would have a chance to win. I've never seen a college line with more ability. Well, let's go to their position group. They're the defensive line coach, Marv Gu. They have ability, a great deal of courage, and are emotionally dedicated. They are the hardest working group I've ever coached. And for how good they are, their record speaks for itself. I think Coach Gu would have bought in with Coach Eric Henderson's dog work ethic, for sure. I mean, discipline, attitude, work ethic, grit. Coach Gu, Coach Orgeron, they're all from the same, I think they all come from the same mold. All 3, or, all are, they're all about development, right? So this is why I think 2025 and beyond could be Wild Bunch 3. In last year's recruiting class, 2023, USC brought in Braylon Shelby, DJ David Peavy. Those are your ends. In 2024, defensive line class got a little deeper. You brought in Cameron Fountain. You brought in Carlon Jones. You're bringing in Jade Abasiri. You got Ratumana Bulabalavu. All right. And I've gone over the guys in 2025. It's shaping up to be a monster class. I mean, based on rankings, that 2025 class would be a top 5 or higher. And don't forget, Juju Lewis is the headliner, playing quarterback. But oh my. Eesh. Give me that defensive line class. And I'll make the promise to my Locked On USC listeners. If USC gets all 5 of those guys, we can debate if they get 4 of those guys. I'll do Frank the Tank. I will streak down the street. Yep, you heard it here first. We're going streaking. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what brings home your ride or die. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back, because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay, guaranteed fit, only available to USC customers. That's US customers. I threw that in there. Are you watching for Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? You have to turn down the volume with all that shouting. Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Yay or nay? Okay. You guys need to tell me, is it possible? Can you compete and win a national championship without writing checks to both the elite high school kids and those high demand, short supply guys in the transfer portal? Look, I get it. I know USC fans are gnashing their teeth. They're white knuckling their chairs because of the transfer portal, specifically the high demand, short supply positions, defensive line, interior defensive line. Here's the thing, USC fans, you're not alone. Even LSU and Brian Kelly, USC's first opponent this year, they're up against it too. They need interior defensive line help. And as much as we don't like it, Brian Kelly doesn't like it either. But here's the thing. You have to have the money to buy what you need. That's just the way college football is right now, today. But just like USC said, we're not going to overpay in the transfer portal, LSU did the same thing. Tigers head coach Brian Kelly, he told that one of their local TV stations that LSU wouldn't be buying players while he was being asked for an update on the team's search for more defensive linemen. Let me tell you what Brian Kelly said. We were in the market, in the transfer portal, looking for defensive linemen. It hasn't fared very well, quite frankly, because we are selling something a little bit differently. And that is, we want to recruit. We want to engage. We want to build relationships. We want to develop, retain, and have success. We're not in the market of buying players. And unfortunately, right now, that's what some guys are looking for. They want to be bought. We're not going to go out and buy players, end quote. Yes, they are. But like USC, they're not going to overpay. Look, we saw it. They were bidding on Demonic Williams. They had their hand in all the big name players that were out there. So the whole idea that USC and LSU isn't buying players, it's debatable at best. Specifically talking about LSU, look, before NIL was legal, Eric Musselman said it, USC's new basketball coach. The SEC has been doing NIL for a long time. Wink, wink. The argument can be made that Washington and Michigan, they played for the national championship last year, and people could think, you know what, they didn't write checks. Here's my response. If we're talking about hard evidence, legal, I'm using finger quotes for those of you who aren't watching, legal NIL. It's only been around for a few years now, right? It's still evolving. Last year, Texas was in the playoffs. We know they like to write checks. Ohio State's in the discussion annually. We know they like to write checks. In Oregon this year, they're trying to buy their way into the 12-team tournament. So again, does anybody dispute that those three programs, collectives, that they like to write checks by any means necessary? Of course not. Look, I don't want to conflate the two issues. When it comes to high school recruiting and filling your transfer portal needs, you have to be able to pay both. Just a matter of fact, just the way it is today, right now. So again, even though Texas lost to Washington in the playoffs last year, remember, only one team can win the whole thing, right? However, if you're in the playoffs, you can at least say, hey, we're doing everything possible to make it happen. And I'm talking about we went out, we bought the players, we recruited the players, we paid those guys. NIL is still evolving. Texas was competing for the chance last year. And this year, they're considered a heavy lean to make the playoffs, to win the championship. Same as Ohio State. Will they win it? Will Oregon win it? I don't know. We can pick this discussion up again when there's more hard evidence at the end of the season. But the way things are looking right now, today, when it comes to recruiting the elite players out of high school and signing the transfer portal guys who are in high demand, short supply, I don't think you can make the argument that you don't have to do it. Right now, you have to pay both. Again, I'm talking about the elite players or the perceived elite players. And when it comes to interior defensive line players, you categorize them again, the laws of supply and demand. High demand, short supply. Guess who gets to set the market price? The players. They know that. So if it is all about the Jimmies and the Joes, and the Jimmies and the Joes want to be paid to play and transfer, then I'm not sure what else can be done. Maybe you have an answer. Do you have a solution? I think this offseason, it's spelled it out. It's highlighted. Those guys in the transfer portal, they say, hey, you know what? I've been in college for a few years. I put in my blood, sweat, and tears. Pay me. The elite high school recruits, you got to pay those guys. You got to pay recruits just to come visit you right now. That's the standard. If you want those elite recruits to take an unofficial visit, they're not paying for it. They already don't pay for the official visits. But yeah, now collectives have to step up, say, all right, you know what? We'll take care of your expenses for the unofficial visit weekend. You got to play the game. If you want to start developing relationships, that's what you got to do. So, do you disagree? Can you win a championship? Can you recruit at a high level without writing that check? I'd like to believe that you can. What the heart feels and what the head says are two different things. I don't know. Who knows? Maybe there are more Cameron Fountains out there who are willing to wait for the big money because they believe in relationships and being developed. It's possible. I just don't know. I just don't know if that's if Cameron's not the exception to the rule now. I kind of get the feeling he's the exception to the rule. Because again, once these guys are in college and they're developed and they start, becoming the players you want them to be, if they're not getting paid at your respective school, they're going to jump in the transfer portal. They're going to find somebody who will pay them. And right now, I think USC is kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. They're doing the recruiting part in high school. Their House of Victory collective is built up, ready to go for that 2025 defensive line class that we were talking about in the previous segment. But are they prepared to pay the players they need to fill those holes in the transfer portal? It's kind of hard to say, yeah, they are, because it's not happening right now. I've been told I'm a competitive person. The more you get to know me, the more you agree. And when you hear to my voice, and when I tell you I'm a competitive person, there it is. So because of that competitive side, I've fallen in love with the game Monopoly Go. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's been downloaded 150 million times. It's a great twist on Monopoly where you play not one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations. You're building up amazing cities, and that's going to bring you big money. My favorite part, messing around with my friends, trolling them. You own the properties, they're renting from you. Walk on in, take their money. They won't know what happened. But it's not just my competitive side that loves it. You can team up with friends and people all around the world in time tournaments and earn huge rewards. So get in the game. Join your friends. Download Monopoly Go. Now free on the App Store or Google Play. Did you know that USC does not have a losing record versus the Big Ten Conference? Not one team do they have a losing record against. Now, there's some teams that that they're 500, but USC has a winning record versus everybody that they play, or at worst, a tie record. Let me go over these numbers with you real quick, because then I have a follow-up question. So USC versus Illinois. USC's 111. They've lost 2. Indiana 4-0. Iowa Hawkeyes 7-3. Maryland. You know what? USC hasn't beaten Maryland yet. They haven't played Maryland yet. 0-0. Michigan. USC leads that series 6-4. Sparty, Michigan State 4-4. Even Steven. Minnesota. USC leads that series 6 wins, 1 loss, 1 tie. Nebraska, 4 wins, 0 losses, 1 tie. Northwestern, 5-0. Ohio State, USC 13, Ohio State 10, and a tie. Penn State, USC 6, Nittany Lions 4. Purdue, they don't. USC 3, Boilermakers 1. Rutgers, here's another program USC hasn't played yet. 0-0. Wisconsin, USC 6, Whiskey 1. That last one happened in the Holiday Bowl during the Clay Helton era. So, yeah. Other than that, let me the other teams that are following along USC's pets that they brought along. So, against UCLA, USC has 50, the Bruins 34. There's 7 ties. Against the Huskies, USC has beaten them 51 times against 31 losses, 4 ties. And then that school that wears puke green and yellow, USC 38, Oregon 23, and there's 2 ties. So there it is. USC owns the Big Ten Conference. Of those teams that USC will be playing going forward, which ones are the most intriguing to you? Obviously, USC versus Ohio State, USC versus Michigan. Those are always going to be the big marquee games. But what are some of the ancillary games? Some of the complementary games that you say, you know what? I want to put that on my bucket list. Let's pull the 3 former Pac-12 teams aside. Don't worry about those guys. Has anybody been to? Whenever USC plays Notre Dame, everybody goes to Chicago. Well, I've never been to Champaign. I want to go see USC play at Illinois. What I really like, this is what I'd love to see happen. I don't know if they can make it happen, USC basketball versus Indiana basketball in Bloomington, Indiana, Assembly Hall, home of Bobby Knight. The same weekend that USC can play football on Saturday. So figure it out some way, get that basketball game on a Friday night maybe, football on Saturday. Oh, that'd be great. USC can improve to 5-0. And I didn't look, but I'm not sure what USC's record is versus Indiana in basketball, if they've even played. My loyal listeners, my everydayers out there, hit me up. Educate me. Thank you. Obviously, you want to get on top of Maryland. USC plays Maryland this year. Sparty. The last time USC played Michigan State was in the Rose Bowl. Michigan State won. I want to go to East Lansing, Michigan. Trojans, Spartans. Yeah. You can see all the headlines being written way in advance. USC, Nebraska, been there, done that. I still want to go. It's just not one of the more intriguing games to me. Obviously, getting out to Ann Arbor for the first conference game of the year. Looking forward to that. I've never been to Happy Valley. So that's definitely on my bucket list. I want to do that. I want to see the whiteout. I think that's going to look great. And then, the reason why I want to go to Iowa, it's obviously the football game. But I think I love those behind the scenes stories. And that the thing that they do at Iowa football games where everybody turns and waves to the children's hospital. Yeah, you heard it. I got a little choked up with that. So I'm all about that type of stuff. And I've told you before, heading out to Madison, Wisconsin, I will leave the press box. I want to feel that visceral energy, that jump around. I'm looking forward to it. Big Ten Conference. Who's going to be the first team out of that conference, though, to have a winning record versus USC? You'd say, well, the closest team is going to be Michigan State. They're 4-4. USC doesn't play Sparty this year. They play Maryland this year. Do they play Rutgers this year? Both of those guys, 0-0. USC cannot open conference play losing against either one of those teams. Let me know. Hit me up in the comments section. Which games do you really look forward to? Don't say all of them. We all look forward to all of them. But which games specifically say, you know what? I got to do that. I got to do that. All right. You know what else we got to do? We got to end the show. It's that time. But I will be back again tomorrow with another episode. 5 times a week. That's what we do here. Locked on USC, part of the Locked On Network, your team every day. And you know when you're done making Locked On USC your first listen every day. When you're done, you're heading on over to wearesc.com. Oh, by the way, I've been misinforming you. It's not $1 for a month of VIP. Right now, you spend $1, you're getting 2 months. Go check it out. I'll be back again tomorrow with another episode of Locked On USC. So until tomorrow, everyone, you know what to do.